Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee for today, March 27th. We also have noted as a public hearing a joint meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee as well as the Housing Policy and Development Committee. As you can see, there is not a quorum for the Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee, so we'll leave the cameras on and we'll sit here and wait until two of our colleagues have the ability to join us. I will note that Councilmember Kano is out sick today. So we are waiting on quorum for our own committee, as well as sounds like housing policy and zoning and planning does have quorum with the committee. Thank you to Chair Schrader, with myself, Councilmember Ellison, and Councilmember Reich. So we'll wait on quorum for economic development. I profoundly apologize for this. Thank you, everyone, very much for your patience. Unfortunately, we still don't have quorum, although we have been joined by the mayor, so I want to thank the mayor for coming today. Because we're using up so much of everybody's time, I'd like to take up item number 9, which is a presentation from Twin Cities Rise for their Fair Chance Housing Toolkit, and just get a sense of what they're doing. I'm sure everybody would like to learn what you're doing, and we'll go ahead and approve the Memorandum of Understanding when we finally get quorum. Mr. Streitz, welcome.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for inviting us over today. So real quickly, and we'll move quickly. I know you like to keep things prompt.
Wow, we got all the time in the world right now.
Well,
So.
right. I have some things to say. No, number one, thank you for having us here. Twin Cities Rise is a nonprofit organization that's been around for 25 years, helping people who are very, very low income train for and attain long-term employment. We've always focused on African-American men, particularly people with criminal history. And as we know right now, the city of Minneapolis and employers throughout the state of Minnesota face a critical worker shortage. Yet at the same time, we have people sitting on the sidelines, unemployed for a mistake they maybe made 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. So we have people sitting on the sideline, employers saying they want people in the game. And we have a proposal in front of you today for the city of Minneapolis to sponsor what is truly probably one of the most unique, I think, employment opportunities the state has seen in many years. Because what we've done at Twin Cities Rise is we reached out to an organization called Roots and Rebound. Roots and Rebound is based in San Francisco, California. They have a group of lawyers who look at laws and practices and regulations, and they decipher through all of them and say all the reasons that employers have stated over the many years why they can't hire people with criminal history are largely not true. There's a lot of mythology and a lot of baggage around people who've made a mistake with their life, and employers have erected barriers to their employment. So it's critical at this particular point in our time that we say as a state, as a city, that people who've made a mistake in their past have worth and they're worthy of employment in their future. So think about that. If you're a young man or woman like myself and you made a mistake, you ended up doing time, now for the rest of your life, you're going to be told you can't be employed. Think about that, what that means and what it does to your hope and your spirit, right? So what we see at Twin Cities Rise is thousands of people come to us every year, say, I really don't know that I could ever have a job. I don't know that I'm worthy of a job. I've been told no over and over and over again. And what we say to them is, you do have worth. You will find a job. So the average income coming into our program last year was less than $500. Upon graduation, it was over $30,000. 65% of the people who came to us had criminal history. Some of it murder, some of it smoking a joint, right? So it doesn't matter to us. We don't make that judgment. What we say is you have worth, you have dignity, and if you commit to yourself, we will help you get employment that'll change your life forever. Economic self-sufficiency, right? So that's what we do, and that's at the core of what we do. So this employer guide that we're getting ready to unveil in the state of Minnesota is a definitive guide for HR people, for cities, states, corporations, private and nonprofit, to say we can hire people with criminal history. We can help people get back to work who deserve a second chance with their life. And that's what the Fair Chance Hiring Guide is all about. I would really be honored if the city of Minneapolis would be a co-sponsor, along with McKnight, the state of Minnesota, the Department of Human Rights, and many, many, many others. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. I want to introduce my colleague, Jacqueline Carpenter. And may I also say that the staff at CPAD, particularly Marie Larson and Deb Barhelgen, have been incredible partners. As soon as we approached the city, they said, yes, we are interested. We want to partner with you. So I want to commend them both and thank you for your time.
Are there any questions for Mr. Streitz, and/or we'd invite anyone else on the team who'd like to say something to come up?
Marie, Jacqueline? Yep. Jacqueline Carpenter, my colleague at Twin Cities Rise.
Ms. Carpenter, welcome.
Thank you. We very much appreciate your considerations. I've spent 20 years in the private industry helping employers build staffing strategies. Often they're saying no and overlooking many people that are still on the sidelines. This tool guide will provide resources for them and how to let them enter into the workforce. So there's really a how-to. Minnesota put Ban the Box in place. This is really the second step. It's allowing them to get innovative with their creating pathways for hiring. Instead of saying no with a standard policy, this allows them to have multiple policies within the same company. We feel that it's really innovative because employers haven't yet figured out how to address that population. It will be the third state in the country to have this employer guide, and we know there's many to follow. So we do believe this is innovative, and we would appreciate your sponsorship. We thank you very much for your time, and I'm here to answer any additional questions you might have.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank
I
you.
would move approval of the Memorandum of Understanding, but we don't have quorum. So we'll do that as soon as we achieve quorum. Thank you for your help. Given that we can't take up any other business on our entire agenda or the joint committee agenda, we'll just wait until we have quorum. If we don't have quorum by 2 o'clock, we will cancel the meeting. Thanks. Thank you to the quick thinking of my colleagues. We actually do have quorum of the Housing Policy Development Committee as well as Zoning and Planning. So I'm going to go ahead and call those two meetings to order, and we're going to move forward with the public hearing so that we don't make anyone wait any longer. And I will note the Chair of Zoning and Planning is with us, as well as the Vice Chair of Housing Policy Development. I also serve on both of those committees. So I'm going to open the public hearing on item number 1 of the Zoning and Planning Committee, as well as item number 1 of the Housing Policy Development Committee, which is the nomination of David Frank as our Community Planning and Economic Development Director. And I will call on the mayor should he want to say a few words first. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If it is all right with you, can I speak after the public hearing is
Absolutely.
closed? Thank you.
So I guess what we'll do is we'll open the public hearing on item number 1, which is the appointment of the Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. I have 6 people signed up in advance, starting with Dan, followed by Luke, Sarah, Ravi, and D'Angelo, who I know all of them, so I would refer to them by their first names, as well as Patrick. If there are other people here to speak, feel free to just get in line. We would ask you to try to stick to about 2 minutes. Mr. Collison, welcome.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, Goodman, council members. My name is Dan Collison, Executive Director of the Easttown Business Partnership, 810 South 7th Street, Minneapolis. Director of Downtown Partnerships for the Minneapolis Downtown Council and Downtown Improvement District, and Executive Director for the 2020 Partners in the North Loop. I'm here to speak in support of the appointment of David Frank to the position of Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. I've known David for almost a decade and appreciate his ability to innovate in very diverse roles, from neighborhood organizer and developer to transit-oriented development for the city, Director of Economic Policy and Development, most recently his interim role as Director of Interim for CPED. In each role, I've witnessed David model an expanding leadership skill set needed for this current nominated role for the city. And in light of the new and ever-changing challenges of economic development in our time and the threats and opportunities facing us as we seek to be more diverse and equitable and inclusive city, I believe David brings unique capacity to be both externally focused toward the community in program design and internally mindful to the enterprise, such that practical solutions can be explored and measurable outcomes attained. Most importantly, and I think this is most importantly, he's accessible to him, to his staff, to the leaders in the community. And I believe that he's clear-minded and creatively sensible about the ways the city can partner and find leverages with leading nonprofits, philanthropy, and businesses who are poised and positioned to work with the city enterprise in accomplishing our collective implementation goals as we lean into our new 2040 comprehensive plan and a vision. I fully and wholeheartedly recommend him to this position.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll hear next from Luke. See Luke Shem. Okay, we'll move on to Sarah Harris.
Madam Chair, council members, Mr. Mayor, thank you for hearing from me today. I'm here to speak in support in favor of David Frank as the new director of CPED. I've known David for nearly 20 years, and I will tell you that I think he brings the best of both worlds in many capacities. First of all, he's of this community. He knows this community. He knows the people. He knows the issues that we're facing, but he's also lived and worked elsewhere and has networks and experience elsewhere, so he can bring innovative ideas back to us here as we're trying to tackle new challenges and do new things in our community. Secondly, he's worked both in the public and the private sector, and he understands the opportunities presented by both sectors as well as the limitations within them, and he can help to bridge both communities together in talking about how to get things done for our city. And lastly, I've been in many meetings with David where he is a great listener and a good leader, but the listening comes first. I've heard him speak only after he's listened to all of the voices in the room, understood the issues, and then provided sage wisdom in moving whatever the issue at hand is forward. So I strongly support his moving forward into this new position. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here today. We'll move on to Ravi Norman. Mr. Norman, welcome.
Hello, Madam Chair and City Council members. I'm Ravi Norman, the CEO of Thor Companies. I believe we are the state's largest ethnic minority-owned business. We're a developer, designer, and builder. Well, I've had the privilege of working with David Frank for about 6 years more actively, and our organization has worked with David for a long period of time. I have found him to be very transparent. I have found him to be a really good communicator. To Sarah's point, a great listener. I found him to be very competent, someone who knew the issues, understood policy, understood precedents, and was able to communicate that very clearly so that business people like myself can make hopefully very cogent decisions. I think he is of the community. I think he wants to do what's best for the city. I think he also knows how to balance a lot of different cooperative interests and shared interest, and I would highly recommend him for the position of Executive Director of CPED. Thank you.
D'Angelo, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, City Council, Mayor. I'm also speaking in support of David Frank for the Director of CPED. I can't repeat more of what has been said, but from a clear transparency point, David allows those in the community who want to dream and invest and be innovative, but he also grounds everyone with a sense of reality of what can and cannot be done based on timelines and expectations. I think one of the biggest things for the business community is about clarity, about what the risks are and what the limitations are going in. I think he delivers that for many of us in the community, and with that, I'm in full support of him for this position.
Thank you for being here today. We'll move on to Patrick.
Madam Chairwoman, council members, Mr. Mayor, thank you for this opportunity, but I think I can keep this very, very short. I believed I was signing up. It was a sign-up sheet. So I don't have a lot to say other than I have heard, I'm here in support of Mr. Frank for the directorship. And I believe you'll do a wonderful job based on many things that I've heard about him throughout our company and other people throughout the years in downtown Minneapolis. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We also have Amir Banter. Is there someone here by that name? Oh, sure. Mr. Schwartzman, welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity. So I run Common Roots Cafe, and for the last 10 years, I've been doing business in Minneapolis, and I've had the pleasure of working with many of you. I have had limited experience working with David. I stand here not to support him, but also not to oppose his nomination and confirmation. I really want to emphasize the needs that I see we have for this department and the needs that, as I expect he'll be confirmed, Mr. Frank will be facing. And I hope that you'll all work with him actively to help drive the city forward, with the mayor as well. I see a tremendous need to support small businesses in a much more active way. We know that small businesses create a large portion of the jobs in the city. We know that they're a key gateway to help people, especially people of color and low-income people, step up out of poverty and out of difficult situations. We know that across our city, people are starting small businesses that are changing people's lives in a positive way and helping to make our community the place that it is. I have also seen repeatedly through my past 10 years as a relatively privileged, experienced person who speaks English as a first language and has a good understanding of the systems around me, that it is very hard, even for me, to know the programs that exist, to find support for basic things like finding new locations or accessing capital. It's much, much harder for large portions of our community that need their support. CPED is missing very, very basic programs. We don't have support for access to capital in a way that reaches many people without the support of a bank. And unfortunately, banks too often do not provide the loans that people need to get jobs going. We don't have support for finding locations. We don't have other kinds of very basic programs to help us deal with the challenges that development faces, which is an opportunity, but also a challenge for many in our communities. And the need is really pressing. So it's not personal experience with David or any kind of particular concerns, but I'm concerned about the future of the department. And I do very much hope that this will be a new day where we'll see a real focus from everyone in our community, especially all the council and the mayor and Mr. Frank in his new role, to really step up and make this be a new day where change happens right away. We don't need lots of studies. We've done studies. We see pressing need. We need action that pretty quickly confronts these challenges that are making it more challenging for people to start businesses, especially as we see the minimum wage increase and we see earn, sick, and safe time, both things that I very strongly support. We're expecting more from our business community, more from our small businesses. We really need to step up and make that support come every day and come out of CPED as a leadership and not, I'd love to see leadership coming from that department to try and confront these challenges. And it's not to say that there aren't people who have been working on these things. Many of you have very, very actively been working on these issues. Many staff have worked hard. It's not to say that there's not change happening. It's just not at the pace that the need is. So thank you for the time.
Thank you for being here today. And so then I must have pronounced your name wrong. Anna, you're welcome.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for having me. I'm also here as a business owner in Minneapolis. I own Two Buddies Green Cleaning Company. We are huge supporters of living wage, and also we employ over 100 people. I very much bootstrap my business. As many of you know, women and minorities often have a hard time getting access to capital. It wasn't until 10 years into my business career here, which is like since I started Two Buddies, that I even really heard about CPED. It wasn't actually until we had a brick and mortar establishment on Lake Street and now an office on Minnehaha that we were approached by some nonprofits that handle some of the grants that CPED offers. And then as I started asking around to my network, oh yeah, there's these grants available and there's this access to capital. But for me, it was a little too late. I mean, I bootstrapped. We had actually a pretty awful experience with our first lending. Our first lending experience was pretty scary and it cost us a ton of money and lawyer fees. And I really wish that I would have known about some of the programs before that. As entrepreneurs, there's not a lot of time to spend going out and actively seeking and digging through pages and pages on the internet to try to get access to the information that could have been really useful. And also at some pivotal times, we switched 3 years back, we switched 90 employees over from contracts to employees. We also are happy to pay sick and safe time where we want to benefit our employees. But I can tell you in this environment right now, trying to benefit 120 people is no small feat. So, those programs that we have, and I would love to see some programming or at least outreach. Nobody has ever reached out to me as a business owner, employing over 100 people in this town, paying lots of taxes. I have never been reached out to from CPED or had any communication about any of the programs that might be available. When we scaled recently, that's another point. It's not just at startup, but scaling can be a really scary time for a business, because if you don't do it right, if you don't get the access to capital you need when you need it, things can go wrong. You have to let people go. So thank you for your time. I just also want to, I don't know Mr. Frank personally. I would love to see more. I would love to see more outreach. I would love to see more for the small business community in Minneapolis.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Oh, Mr. Frank. So first, I'll note that we've been joined by Councilmember Gordon, which is a quorum of the EDRS committee. So I will officially open the public hearing now for EDRS also and see if there's anyone else here to speak to this issue, which is the appointment of David Frank as the CPED director. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue besides Mr. Frank? Anyone? Anyone? Mr. Frank, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members, Mayor. Thank you everyone for being here today. I'm really excited to be here. I thank you, Mayor, for making this a possibility. I love this city. I have had a chance as interim director since this past August to work with the great staff at CPED and across the enterprise to help grow this city and do great things along the way, like last week, release our draft comp plan, focus on affordable housing with you, Madam Chair, and others of you who care a great deal about affordable housing and the other things that CPED does. And I am very, very excited about working with you, with the staff, with the staff across the enterprise to find new ways to serve our businesses and our residents in all the ways that make Minneapolis great, and even inventing some new ones. So I look forward to the opportunity. It's about the people. You heard me say this during the budget presentation for the department last year. I'll say it again today. It's about the people who work here and start businesses. It's about the people who live here. It's about our work with you and other staff across the enterprise. And I'm really enjoying it. So I hope for your support, and I hope for the chance to continue in the role. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Frank. Seeing no further comments, we'll close the public hearing, and we will call on the mayor to make some remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am proud to put forward Mr. Frank as the next director for our Community Planning and Economic Development Department. I've had the privilege of working with Mr. Frank over many years as a council member, as a resident, as a neighbor. I saw firsthand the work that he did to transform North Loop from an ocean of surface parking lots and empty warehouses, a relatively dead zone, to an area that is thriving and is alive with vibrant activity, new small businesses, new large businesses, affordable housing, as well as mid and upper income housing. And it's a neighborhood that has truly embraced the concept of diversity in every sense of the word, from use to people to socioeconomic background. There's more work to be done. That's just one example. If you watch David Frank's work, I think someone mentioned that he generally doesn't talk until he has all the information before him, and I think that's accurate. He's thoughtful. He's methodical. He's not one to grandstand, but one to understand the complex details of working out a development deal, the complex details of making sure that a small business is heard and then can thrive. And I do want to thank those from Main Street Alliance for coming, because I think the points that they were making here today are valid, and our CPED office as a whole does need to take into account small businesses far more. And I look forward to collaborating with you on that. Thank you for being here. I believe that, as he served as interim director, but he's maintained this high-functioning development review process as the city continues to see over $1 billion in annual construction permit valuation. He's been working with enterprise leadership and his team to craft the Minneapolis 2040 comprehensive plan. And if you've had a chance to read this plan, it is in every way, shape, and form comprehensive. It's taken a lot of the conversation and the words and the meetings and task forces that we've had over the last several years, and what it starts to do is implement a strategy towards growth with inclusivity, towards economic development while accounting for those that are traditionally left behind, and for a true urbanist vision for what Minneapolis can ultimately become. Any time you push for this sort of change, inevitably there's pushback. The only thing that people hate worse than the status quo is any change at all. But I've seen firsthand Mr. Frank's ability to be a change maker. And I think that is exactly what we need in the CPED department right now. So I put forward his name with great pride, and I ask for your support, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for your remarks. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the nomination in any of the committees? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for a very good nomination. I'm happy to support David Frank. I've been lucky enough to have David living in my ward, so he was actually, when I first started running for office, he was very helpful to me in just learning about a few things that weren't obvious about how city government worked. And I've enjoyed getting to know him and appreciated his ability to speak bluntly when it's needed, to summarize some important issues in a way that help people understand it. I also do want to acknowledge the importance of our whole city enterprise getting better at supporting small business. And I think that since that sort of critique was first raised with me, as we've been thinking about it over a few months, I've heard from Danny Schwartzman and others from the Main Street Alliance quite a lot on this issue. And I'll just say that part of my support for Mr. Frank today is because we've had some good conversations about that vision. And I certainly have a vision for our city as one that supports small business more comprehensively and more thoughtfully and more intentionally. And I believe that we share that vision. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I'm happy to support you today. Thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Frank, I actually have some questions for you, if that's cool, yeah? Yes.
Sure.
I just wanted to, my apologies for being late, everyone. I just came from the state capitol, but I just wanted to be able to have an open conversation specifically about the process of equity for you as a leader. So how do you define equity, and what actionable steps have you taken as interim to be able to activate that, and how do you see that moving forward as well?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, a couple small questions, right?
Yes, not loaded at all.
Thank you for giving me the heads up, so I had a little bit to think about it and jot down some notes to myself, if that's okay. So I look back at the mission statement of the department, which is to grow a vibrant, livable, safely built city for everyone. So I will underline that everyone, even though I think on the website it's not underlined, and I will start from there. Equity is integral, not just in the mission statement, but to everything that we are doing and everything that I want us to do. It's not off to the side. It's right there in the middle. And I should say especially racial equity. I'll touch on the comp plan as an example in a minute. It's key to what we do and to how we do it. So I want to just pause there and say, from a, what's it about kind of a standpoint, that's where the department is coming from. That's where I'm coming from. I value it and I believe in it. So I know you're not asking me that question, but I want you to hear that. You'll know that we are working towards equity when we do our community engagement and when we hear what the community says and when we ask, as we think about a project, who will benefit. You and I were together this morning in a meeting about our Upper Harbor Terminal project, and part of that conversation is around who benefits when the city, through CPED, participates in a large scale or small scale development project. Who will benefit? Okay. We are working on equity when we hear from communities where we work about gentrification, about displacement, and when we as a city, through CPED, work on policies to address displacement, to address gentrification as we think about the project. Okay. We want to make sure that the primary beneficiaries of the city investment are the residents and the businesses who are there, and of course the ones who are coming because we need to grow as a city. That's what the department's about. But we want to make sure that the benefit primarily is for the people who are there. It's about the people. And we are using this thinking, as anyone who's looked at the comp plan has seen, to think about, to have difficult conversations, right? And we're just starting. So that's the other thing I want to say, right? I have some examples, if you'd like, about what's been going on since August. It's really about getting started, right? And we are doing that. So you didn't get to hear me make the pitch, but I hope for your support. And we want to work on these things. I want to work on these things.
Great, thank you. And one last follow-up is, what's your favorite part about the job?
What's my favorite part about the job? So I was being teased this morning at home about how I, don't usually dress quite this way. And I said, well, it's a little bit like I have a job interview, right? So here we are having the job interview. Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, my favorite part about the job is that when I get up in the morning, if I have a good day, I am doing well for the public, for the people.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to just read some comments from Councilmember Cano, who is home sick today. She says, I've had the opportunity to work with Mr. Frank for the past 4 years. There's no doubt he has all of the qualities of a top-notch employee. He's a versatile problem solver whose depth of knowledge has an equal amount of range, from successfully helping Latino business owners to opening a paletera on Lake Street to overseeing the city's legally binding growth plans. Mr. Frank makes managing a very complex, high-profile department with hundreds of employees not only seem easy, but enjoyable. He's always professional and ready to share solutions that you didn't even know you had. The creativity, spirit, and energy he brings to the city can only be mirrored by his sense of style. And thank you for that, by the way, she says. I'm looking forward to casting my official vote in support of David Frank as our new CPED director, and thank Mayor Fry for bringing his nomination forward. So that is from Councilmember Cano. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment? Councilmember Ellison.
I want to support Mr. Frank, but I also want to echo what Main Street Alliance had to say about, I had a constituent over north who made the comment, the city of Minneapolis has some of the best programs of any city and some of the worst outreach, right? And I really took that to heart. To know that both as an elected, but also with the support of city staff, that we've got to do a better job of letting people know all of the incredible work that we're doing and that we're trying to do on behalf of the residents of Minneapolis, and that all the innovation and the creativity and the support that is there will fall short if we're not able to communicate with that. In my experience in working with Mr. Frank and working with other members of CPED, I think that commitment to letting folks know, to working with the council as well, to make sure that we are letting the folks of the city know the work that we're doing on their behalf. You guys are committed to that and have been so far. And so I really appreciate the way that you've helped engage me as a new council member in my learning curve and making sure that we let the city know what we do. So thank you, and I'm happy to support you, Mr. Frank.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I will have the final word from members of the panel today. I want to thank Mayor Fry for this appointment. I think this is a long time coming for someone who's worked for our city for more than 5 years, came to us as a transportation expert and transportation and transit-oriented development expert, moved into economic development, and has served in what I think has been a very difficult interim position over a controversial election with a group of people who had been leaderless, let's just face it, for about 4 years. And so when you're coming in as the interim director to a group that has not had very strong leadership from the top, it's very difficult to try to figure out what moves to make in the middle of a very contentious election. And I think Mr. Frank has done an incredible job of managing that. What I will say most importantly about Mr. Frank is he's not about talk, he's about action. And that's what makes him different than probably many previous council members, current council members, or other leaders in the department. He doesn't like to talk about doing things. He likes to do them. And now that we have unleashed this interim status and hopefully given him this position, we'll be able to really see him shine. I want to note that this is a position that is mainly about management. I want to note that this is bigger than the Office of Economic Development and Small Business. It also involves development services, long-range planning, entitlement planning, affordable housing, housing development, all of these different departments under an organization that manages over 200 people with a very strong leadership team. I will note his strong leadership team, every one of them is in the room here. So maybe you can raise your hands and we can point out Andrea Brennan, Heather Worthington, Steve Poore, Deb Barhelgen, Chuck Lutz are all here today. which I think is the first time in a long time that all of the department directors have been here to support the nomination of a CPED director. Lastly, with regard to the small business issue, I do want to note that the small business team has been operating in the coordinators department for the past year, not at CPED. So once we're able to bring the small business team, and they're very good work, quite frankly, in 1 year they've done a lot, in line with our development services, our economic development programs, I think we will see, and we are demanding more responsiveness. And we need to tell our story better, but we also need to do more in different ways. I think David Frank is the person to do that. This is, as I said, the first time in 4 years where there will be very strong leadership. And I hope that everyone is willing to go along for that ride, because that's what the public is asking for, which is incredible movement in terms of the direction of our community planning and economic development division. So with that, I am going to have the Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee, which is made up of council members Fletcher, Goodman, Ellison, Gordon, and Cunningham, vote on my motion to approve the mayor's nomination of David Frank. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. I will now call on Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. And also, I appreciate that we're having a joint meeting of 3 different committees. I think that should tell us and everybody how long or wide a reach CPED has in terms of the enterprise. And on behalf and for the Housing Policy and Development Committee, I will move approval of the appointment of David Frank for Director of CPED. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? That motion carries.
The Housing Committee is adjourned. We'll call on Councilmember Schrader.
On behalf of the zoning and plan, I'd like to motion that we approve the approval of David Frank. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Thank you. We approve it. And I will close the zoning and planning committee.
So now we are left with the Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee, which has an agenda of 9 items. We have dispensed with the discussion item on item number 9, but we are going to approve an MOU. So I am going to move items 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, which is the consent agenda, plus the MOU that we've already discussed. Are there further comments or questions on any of those items? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. We'll move on to our public hearing agenda. Moving on to item number 2, which is an extended hours license for the Holiday Superstation at 620 Central Avenue Northeast. Ms. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this public hearing is for Holiday Superstations LLC, doing business as Holiday Station Store 468 at 620 Central Avenue Northeast. They currently have a gas filling station, grocery, food manufacturer, tobacco dealer's license, and they currently operate until 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and Friday and Saturday until 11 p.m. This application is for an extended hours operation so that they can operate for 24 hours. This application requires a public hearing. Public hearing notices were sent to residents and property owners within 300 feet of the premises. It also was shared with Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association, Northeast Business Commerce, and public hearing responses were, we did receive responses. There were 16 opposed and 15 in support, and 6 were neutral. Staff did take some action on the responses that received that were opposed and addressed those with the ownership. And the concerns were about noise from the pumps and also the operation of the car wash and a signage for a one-way. And we're happy to report that the ownership took proactive steps to let us know that they will not be operating the car wash after 10 p.m. And they do not have amplified sound at the pumps, so no music and no amplification at the pumps to address that concern, and they've installed a sign. This application was reviewed by Dan Jacobs and was guided by the top-notch leadership and humble committed public servant, Manager Grant Wilson, and we are making a recommendation to approve.
Are there any questions for Ms. Roberts on item number 2? Seeing none, this is a public hearing on item number 2, which is an extended hours license for the Holiday Station store at 620 Central Avenue Northeast. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Mr. Cronin,
Madam Chair.
welcome.
And members of the committee, I am here representing Holiday Station Stores today. I'm joined by David Edquist, who is the real estate manager, and Jason Pelton, who most importantly at this point in the process is the holiday employee who is responsible for the operations of that store. I think he worked with your staff, and our son was out. He's also doing many things on a day-to-day process. The very simple request is that you approve the recommendation of your staff. If I could have 2 more minutes, I would appreciate it.
You can.
I know that you have received a number of comments and concerns, and as we had a chance to review them, it was we were struck by how similar they were to the comments and concerns that we worked through as we went through the land use process for the city to get approval for the store. We were able to address the concerns, mitigate the concerns working with the neighborhood group and with the planning staff. We were able to get approval of the Land Use Planning Committee and the board of the Marcy Homes Association for the store. They felt comfortable with it. Planning staff recommended for it. I think we worked a number of issues out, and after a public hearing, the Planning Commission also said the same thing. Jason is still working on a day-to-day basis, fine-tuning. The store is open the store has open for a month, and he's still working, I think, every day probably on finding fixes, working with your staff to respond to any concerns. We believe that our application, which has the gap from 2 a.m. until 4 a.m. when the store will be closed, and there'll be nobody coming to the site to go in and out of the store, and that we are not asking for the extended hours for the car wash, addresses many of the concerns which you have, and I think the concerns that we've been dealing with the whole time. So with that, we simply ask that you approve the application, and we look forward to continuing to work. And Jason from now on. So that's why he's here today, to hear you, to meet with you and know that this is a serious process and we can move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Any
testimony.
questions? Thank you.
It's been a long time since I've seen you. Thanks for being here. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Morse. I live at 518 7th Street Southeast. So I am 5 blocks from the gas station, right down 7th Street. And it is the nicest new station in Minnesota if you haven't been there. And it is also enormous. And the people that live at 700 Central live right across the street, that fancy new building that they put up before the gas station. That fancy new building, red, that's the apartment building that's 1/2 block away, was put up before that. And I'm glad I will not be living that close to the gas station at 1 o'clock in the morning on a nice summer night, because it is a frisky place. It's just so big. And I'm really glad they're there, and I wish they would just keep their hours the same. I'm glad they're not going to have the car wash, because it's really noisy. So if you could keep the hours the same and keep the gas station, that'd be really good for our neighborhood, and the neighbors would really appreciate it.
Thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Yep. I'm Danette Hill, and I work for Nolan Properties Group. We own 700 Central. I'm here representing the ownership group. We are at 328 Berry Avenue, but the location is 700 Central. I understand the need for services in the area. I totally get that. We worked with the city for several years trying to get this project approved. We spent $32 million on the multifamily housing project, also the commercial, trying to hopefully accommodate the city with their mission of, urban vision and vibrant and safe community. And the other objectives were just the transit-oriented development, maintaining, enhancing the fabric of the city's historical buildings. I mean, we spent a lot of money trying to make sure that we actually were accomplishing those needs. And I understand that you guys came in and you've maybe taken away the car wash, but there's still complaints that we get from the residents of the community that there is noise, there is cars, the lights and things like that. And that was one of our complaints, or one of the things that we addressed in the letter that we sent to the city and the council members here. We felt like from the beginning that they knew their project wouldn't be approved with extended hours. And so it kind of seemed a little disingenuous to us that, you know, they came back later and were requesting the extended hours. I'm glad that the car wash isn't going to be, you know, they're open later. And I appreciate those efforts for sure. But again, we have had a lot of complaints from our residents, and the hope would be that you wouldn't extend the hours any longer than they currently operate today. For 32 million reasons why we're hoping that you actually, you know, reject the extended hours, along with a lot of the different neighborhood people that we have spoken with as well. And we didn't hear from the city council members, and maybe somebody else got the letter, but so I didn't hear that there was a response or you were proposing to pass it. We just hope that you hear our concern and our tenants' concerns. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everybody who came and testified today. I've been receiving a lot of feedback on this issue, both for and against. It's actually been one of the most active issues and probably the thing that there's the least consensus on. We've heard more, I would say, from people who see the convenience of having the extended hours, especially as we're creating a really nice, dense, walkable corridor there in the Nicollet Island East Bank Neighborhood Association. They particularly saw a benefit to have something walkable that's open late, and so there are people who certainly weighed in favor. We certainly also heard some concerns. I've appreciated the efforts that the Holiday Station management has made to accommodate as many of those concerns as they can, and I hope that you'll continue doing that and continue being good neighbors. I've appreciated your work with the Second Precinct to make sure that we're thinking about the safety concerns and addressing those issues and really moving forward with this in a responsible way. And so with that, I will offer my support and I'll move approval of the application.
Item number 2 has been moved for approval of the extended hours. Are there further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We will move on to the third item, which is El Nuevo Miramar. Ms. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this application is from El Nuevo Miramar, Inc., doing business as El Nuevo Miramar. It's located at 501 East Lake Street, and it currently has an on-sale liquor license, Sunday sales with Class B license for entertainment. They are requesting a permanent expansion of premises to allow for a sidewalk cafe and to allow for late night food license. The sidewalk cafe, as it expands, will consist of 9 four-top tables on 5th Avenue South and 4 tables on East Lake Street. The sidewalk cafe will close at 11 p.m. daily and will not allow for any entertainment outdoors. Additionally, the licensee is requesting to obtain a special late night food license to operate from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. to sell food. Both of these applications require a public hearing, and that public hearing notice was sent to residents and property owners within 300 feet of the premises. We received 1 response in opposition, and the basic summary of that opposition is alcohol sales cause problems for neighborhoods. Lead Inspector Greg Benning prepared this application and is making recommendation to approve the license.
Are there any questions for Ms. Roberts on item number 3? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on item number 3, which is a special late night food license at 501 East Lake Street. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Ellison.
Madam Chair, I vote to approve this item.
Item number 3 has been moved for approval. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll then move into our last remaining item, which is a quasi-judicial public hearing on a rental license revocation at 2126 Irving Avenue North, 2814 Newton Avenue North, 2113 Ilion Avenue North, 2524 Portland Avenue, 2216 Ilion Avenue North, 3220 Oliver Avenue North, all owned by Mr. Don Kleiberg. We'll first have a presentation from staff. Mr. Magrino, thank you for being here today.
Good afternoon, Chair Goodman and committee members. There are 6 properties involved in this action, which Chair Goodman just listed. 4 of them are duplexes. One is a 6-unit building, and the other is a single-family building. They're all operated as rental properties. The respondent in this matter, Donald Kleiberg, is the owner of record for each and obtained licenses to operate the properties as rental businesses beginning in the 1990s. In September 2017, housing inspections conducted an exterior inspection of 2126 Irving Avenue North, which resulted in a written notice of code violations being issued. The notice directed Mr. Kleiberg to repair or replace the roof, repair or replace exterior walls, install, replace, or repair guardrails, install, replace, or repair handrails, and repair or replace glass in the broken and missing windows throughout the dwelling. The following week, an interior inspection was conducted at the property, which resulted in additional orders being issued, including repairing or replacing interior surfaces, providing or repairing smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, repairing plumbing, and repair or removing illegal or hazardous wiring. With the interior orders that were issued, a notice of intent to condemn was issued, informing Mr. Kleiberg that the property could be condemned if the orders were not completed by October 6, 2017. On October 11th, the reinspection occurred and the orders had not been completed. The property was condemned, placarded with the notice of condemnation, and a notice was sent to Mr. Kleiberg. And a similar situation unfolded at Mr. Kleiberg's property at 2814 Newton Avenue North. Exterior and interior inspections were conducted on October 19th, resulting in a series of orders, including repairing or replacing the chimney, roof, foundation, and heating equipment, completing plumbing repairs, and painting the exterior of the dwelling. A notice of intent to condemn, giving Mr. Kleiberg until November 2nd to correct the condition, was included with the orders. On November 3rd, a reinspection of the property found that the interior violations had not been corrected, and the property was condemned, placarded with a notice of condemnation, and a notice was sent to Mr. Kleiberg. At both properties, the rental licenses were canceled pursuant to Minneapolis Code of Ordinances 244-1925, which requires the cancellation of rental licenses when a property is condemned. And on November 27th, a notice of intent to revoke Mr. Kleiberg's licenses was sent to his listed address of 932 123rd Lane Northwest in Coon Rapids. The notice of revocation was issued pursuant to Minneapolis Code of Ordinances 244-1910-13A, which states that any person who has an interest in 2 rental licenses that were canceled due to condemnation shall be ineligible to hold or have an interest in a rental license for a period of 5 years. Mr. Kleiberg filed an appeal of that revocation action on December 11th, and an evidentiary hearing was scheduled for March 1st, 2018, in front of Administrative Hearing Officer Fabian Hoffner. Notice of the evidentiary hearing was sent to Mr. Kleiberg at his address in Coon Rapids on February 5th. Mr. Kleiberg did not appear for the hearing, and Mr. Hoffner recommended revocation of the license. Mr. Kleiberg did submit a motion to reopen the hearing on March 8th, which was denied by Mr. Hoffner on March 9th. I'll note that in this situation, there's a fairly clear-cut set of regulations in the Code of Ordinances that there was notice given for 2 sets of orders at the property with adequate time given to correct the serious violations. The orders were not complied with until the properties were condemned, which then directs us to revoke the rest of Mr. Kleiberg's licenses. And so we are requesting revocation of the licenses, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Magrino? Councilmember Cunningham.
Was there any sort of, thank you, Madam Chair, were there any sort of communications after the orders had been given to be able to, was there any communication from the property owners in between the time of the it being officially condemned? Was there any abatement plans discussed or anything like that?
Chair Goodman, Councilmember Cunningham, I'm not completely familiar with any communication that might have taken place between Mr. Kleiberg and the inspectors. He was given about a month to come to compliance. Given the nature of the orders in this case, including things like smoke detectors and the foundation of the building, it's probably not something that we would have issued extensions for. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Further questions for Mr. Magrino? Seeing none, thank you for your report. Feel free to stay close. This is a quasi-judicial public hearing for which this committee is limited by law to hearing the arguments from the parties to the matter, consisting of the regulatory services staff and the license holder or the license holder's representative. This committee is prohibited from receiving any further information or testimony. The parties are required to limit their comments to arguments specifically addressing the evidence or testimony introduced before the administrative hearing officer who previously conducted a full evidentiary hearing in the matter. The parties may not offer, and the committee will not consider, any new or additional evidence that's not already part of the record developed in the evidentiary hearing. Given that Mr. Kleiberg did not attend the evidentiary hearing, the only information we can take today is what is in the packet in front of us. The committee has been provided with the record of the matter, including the report and recommendation of the administrative hearing officer. I would invite Mr. Kleiberg or his representative to please come forward if he has anything to say, and ask that you keep your comments to that has been described within the evidentiary hearing packet. Are you Mr. Kleiberg? Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for hearing me today. I paid $300 to get a hearing, that I didn't get. And what happened is I was in Mexico February 10th to the 28th. I came home on the 28th, 9 o'clock at night. I got to the airport, 10 o'clock. I got home. I went through all the mail for 2 hours. There was nothing from the county or the city about a hearing the next day, at 1 o'clock. And our mailboxes are set up 5 or 6 in a row, and 2 to 3 times a month, I get other people's mail in my mailbox. In the mail, I thought something this important should have been sent out registered mail. I mean, they had no way. They said they sat there for an hour or half hour on March 1st, and I didn't show up. And my rental property is, it may not seem like it, but it's the most important thing I have going for me outside of my wife and family, and I sold the house at Oliver. That didn't have any condemnation. I sold that one to a realtor, Howard Gangelstead, 3801 Oliver, so that's gone. And then I sold the duplex at 2126 Irving. We had worked on Irving and we'd worked on Newton, and we had over probably half of the problems taken care of. But I just didn't, when they said roof on some of them, and they really meant soffit and fascia, but it was still $15,000 to get the one down at Irving. And I didn't have the money for that one, and we took care of the plumbing thing. I called Ben Franklin Plumbing. They came out, did the work, and forgot to pull the permit. 2 weeks later, I had the paper in my pocket so that I could show the housing inspector. And he said, I don't even want to see it, because it said on my paper that they were supposed to pull the permit to do the water heater. And so I mentioned the mailboxes. Okay, and so I talked to Nick Magrino there, and he said, fill out a letter for Julian Hoffman. So I could do that. And I wanted to read this. I thought it was a good letter, and I thought positively I wouldn't have any problem rescheduling a hearing.
Let me just interrupt you. Mr. Fussy, is this letter in the record, or is this new information to the record?
Madam Chair, I do believe that the letter was made a part of the record in terms of he made a motion to reopen the hearing, and it was considered and rejected by the hearing officer, Mr. Hoffner, but I think it is in the record and it's relevant to the hearing, and this committee would be authorized, if it so chose, to overrule Mr. Hoffner's recommendation and return the matter for an evidentiary hearing. That being said, I think you'd also be authorized to uphold that determination based on the fact that there is no requirement under the ordinances that the notices be sent by registered or certified mail, and the record does reflect that the notices were properly sent.
He didn't give me a hearing, though. All he said was that because they mailed it out They mailed it out, so obviously it wasn't returned as undeliverable. So I must have gotten the mail, which I didn't. So you're saying I can't present any more evidence or talk about it?
You can present anything that's in the record.
Oh, okay. Well, I had just said, this is the letter that Nick Magrino asked me to write, he said, maybe Julian Hoffman will talk to you about it or reschedule it. I said, I'm very sorry about missing the hearing March 1st to keep my rental license. I was in Mazatlan February 10th to the 28th. I came home late and there was no mail. And then I asked if he'd reschedule another date for me I think I got a call from Wu Tran, the housing inspector, and he had said, I'd missed the hearing. And I explained what had happened, and then I sold the property, and now I'm down to, probably half the property, and I'm saying that it's a lot easier to take care of them, but I hate to have all my tenants kicked out, and I just like to keep the rental license and not lose it.
Okay, so basically your argument is you didn't know to come to the hearing, but maybe you could explain how, for example, 2814 Newton Avenue North has had 55 inspections with 134 violations since 1998, and that 2126 Irving has had 56 inspections with 195 violations since 1998. I don't know if it would have, what would you say to that? If you were at the public hearing, I can go through all of your properties actually and note them if you'd like, in case you're unclear about it. 2524 Portland's had 67 inspections with 596 violations. I'll note that on the previous two properties, 44 and 28 violations are still outstanding. At 2113 Ilion Avenue, there have been 43 inspections with 180 violations. There's still an open violation there. At 2216 Ilion, there's been 39 inspections with 200 violations. And at 3220 Oliver, that's one that you've already sold. There were also 10 inspections, 13 violations there. So all of the properties that you own have had more city time and effort gone into them than almost any other landlord. So if the issue is I didn't get the notice of the public hearing, I'd like you to explain all of these violations.
I guess it's...
you didn't get the mail on those either?
When you say 39 inspections, 60 inspections, I just have a hard time believing those figures.
Well, you must not be getting your mail on those either. We have a long, long record, pages after pages of your properties with numerous violations. So clearly you have issues as a landlord. Two of your properties have been condemned.
But is there any chance I can see those, get a record of them, so at least I could look at them? Or
I'm sure
I just have a hard time believing they're true,
Well, I'm sure they're part of the public record since I got them in the packet. So if there is no other testimony that you'd like to present with regard to the fact that you're a good landlord with no problems with inspections or minimal problems with a history of rectifying problems other than saying you didn't get your mail so you didn't know about these problems, I would love to hear that.
I guess I knew about some problems, yeah. And like I said, we'd fixed probably half of them at East Place. We just didn't get them all done in time. Some of the reports, I guess I wasn't even going to. I was trying to get Dan here, the inspector. He was over at 2113 Ilion. We worked everything out with him and his supervisor, and got and take care of all the problems. There were obviously if they had inspections and there were problems, they were worked out. Other than the two that were condemned here. That's the one thing. And it just seems like I guess I'm not sure what to say about those, but some of the like when they said it looks like a clogged drain, so they wrote up a clogged drain. And I had told him that, you know, I can't tell, sometimes you can't tell if it's I go walking my dog, I can't tell if it's a leaf or if it's a piece of shit or something. You can't really tell. And since then, I've sold the house and a water pipe broke in the basement and 250,000 gallons of water went in the drain, you know, in a day. And I mean, it just disappeared. It wasn't in the basement. The drain was not clogged up. So I called the housing inspector and told him, you know, the drain wasn't clogged. It took 250,000 gallons of water and it went down there. Ran up a $4,000 bill for the new owner. And then they had us down for a hazardous water pipe. And it was one of those plastic lines that you hook up to the plumbing. And it had fallen out of the vanity and they stepped on it and they wrote it up as a hazardous water pipe. I'm just saying this kind of stuff happens and I didn't even plan to bring it up. But it just seems like, you know, somebody's coming down on me here. I'm just trying to be honest. You know, and they told me to get a plumber. I got a plumber that works out at Coon Rapids. I didn't realize that he didn't have a license to operate in Minneapolis. He fixed the venting. They gave us 3 days to fix the venting on a Friday, and I got somebody out there on Sunday. That was our plumber from home. And definitely licensed in the city of Minneapolis. And he took care of it. And then they came back and they said he didn't put a plug in there and the plumber said he didn't need it because there was no water pressure or anything. But they still wrote it up and they made me get Ben Franklin Plumbing out. And they came out, ran up an $830 bill and didn't pull the permit like they were supposed to. And then I'm going to tell you one more thing about Newton and then I will sit down. At 2814 Newton, they came out, they posted the house on the 19th of October. They said, you have some repairs to take care of. I got a letter in the mail 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night when I got home on the 23rd of October, saying I had to have the house electrical done and the safety check done by October 24th, 14 hours later. And I got it done. I got an electrician out and he came in, took care of the safety check and stuff. And then the inspector asked me, he said he needed it approved by the inspector, and they have a state inspector for electrical. And that guy didn't get out there for a couple of days. He was unhappy about that, but the electrician had taken care of the work and got it done.
So I love that example. So I want to use that example. So you were cited on the 19th, and you were able to fix the smoke detectors, the electrical safety check wiring, and removing hazardous wiring.
By noon the 24th,
Right.
a day later, probably
But here
about.
are all the issues that the inspector wrote up on that day that were not resolved. Repair support system, clean basement, combustible storage, plumbing repairs, replace heating equipment, replace interior door components, provide shades, extermination contractor required, repair and replace cabinets and counters, repair or replace interior surfaces, repair, remove water damage surfaces, paint exterior, repair, replace the chimney, repair.
Excuse me.
I got a whole long list.
I understand that. I'm saying, excuse me, the house was painted in September, the whole house, and we forgot a 3-foot by 3-foot piece. That's why he wrote that up.
There are
Right over the front door.
There are 28 outstanding violations on this house and 44 still open violations on the other house. That's why these two properties have been condemned. Once you get to that point, all of the other houses could be in fine condition. You cannot have a rental license if you lose your rental license on 2 properties. So that's the place we're at.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
That's why I went to Julian Hoffman and discussed that, and now you guys, you know. Do you have to talk about it and make a decision, or have you already made a decision?
We haven't talked about it yet.
Oh, okay.
But you'll get to hear us talk about it because you're here.
All right. I get something in the mail maybe, or what?
Well, if you stay right here, you'll hear us talk about it. And
All right.
You'll hear us make a decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Magrino, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I will add, it wasn't included in the findings of fact, but there actually was a third condemnation of Mr. Kleiberg's, and it's mentioned in the evidence packet. So I think, again, staff would recommend revocation of the licenses in this case.
Okay, is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Councilmember Cunningham, is that you, sweetie?
Yes.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak to this. I read the entire report and reviewed all of the evidence, and the condition of particularly the Irving and Newton properties, it is unacceptable that folks have to live in those conditions in North Minneapolis, and I think that we need to really have higher standards. Like was mentioned, one property alone had almost 600 code violations. Northsiders deserve better housing options. We should have high standards like this, high standards expected of landlords to provide clean and dignified housing to the people of not only North Minneapolis, but throughout the entire city. And so I just wanted to speak to this and thank the staff for their diligence, because we do need to hold our landlords accountable for the kind of housing that they're providing to folks. Thank you.
Councilmember Ellison.
A lot of these properties are located in my ward, and I just wanted to echo Councilmember Cunningham. Oh, also, thank you, Madam Chair. In saying that, it is unfortunate that this revocation has to happen, because I do want to make sure that Northsiders have housing options that they can live in, that people can stay in their homes, and that they're not displaced. But after looking at the conditions of these houses, it's upsetting. It's upsetting to me as the representative of Ward 5. It's also upsetting to me as a neighbor and as somebody who was born and raised in Ward 5, that my neighbors would be subjected to these kinds of living conditions. And so I hope that in the future, I know that there are probably plenty of landlords who are looking to do the right thing and to provide healthy, clean housing for their residents. But this is an example of, and I won't speak to intent because I don't want to presume that there's ill intent behind this, but it's an example of someone who is not able to keep up and offer dignified living conditions for the people, for my neighbors. And so with that, is it too early to make a motion to approve the revocation? Then I would like to make a motion to approve the license revocation.
A motion to revoke the licenses is in front of us. Are there further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll just say, Mr. Kleiberg, you are a lovely man, and I think you've tried very hard to do the right thing and provide housing for people, but it might be time now to transition into selling these properties to someone who can fix them up and provide stable housing for people in North Minneapolis. You have made a great run at it. You've owned a number of properties. Sounds like these properties, if you didn't have a rental license, would be sold, and hopefully someone can build on your efforts to do a better job of operating them in the future so that we can have stable housing in North Minneapolis. The evidence on this is just simply too overwhelming. The number of outstanding orders, the number of orders on other properties, it just seems like this would be a good time for you. The market's strong. Hopefully you can sell these homes and people will have somewhere to live. Perhaps someone could buy some of these houses and owner occupy them and spend their own, manpower, woman power to fix them up and do better by this beautiful housing stock. A number of these homes are quite beautiful homes in a very important part of town for us. So I concur with the council member of the ward. I want to thank the staff for the work that they've done. It's always very difficult to revoke somebody's license, but in the end, we might be doing you a favor by encouraging you to sell to somebody else at this moment in time and move on from this business that hasn't gone so great for you over the past couple of years. On the motion to approve the revocation, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.